Shalom, Chaverim. Hello, friends. I am Malevsky here. Chabad Family Programs. Training for the marathon. Look up, look down, somewhere on the page. We're gearing up for a Friendship Circle marathon, but I'm going to share Dvar Torah now. It is so beautiful, as always. There's a common quote that's in the Jewish traditional circles. Like when you want to say in a very scholarly way, if you want to say, what has that got to do with anything? You say, Ma inyan Shmitah etzel har Sinai. Ma inyan Shmitah etzel har Sinai. Literally, it's a quote of the words of Rashi, who quotes the Talmud. And the quote is, what does Shmitah have to do with Mount Sinai? And the background is, in this past week's Parsha Behar, at the beginning of the Torah portion, God tells Moshe to command the Jewish people about the laws of Shmitah. Shmitah is the sabbatical year in which the people are prohibited from farming the land, from using the land, from working the land, from harvesting. We leave the land fallow. Let it rest for a year, the seventh year. Just like the seventh day of the week is a day of rest for all Jewish people, so too the seventh year is the year of rest for all land. And this is what God is telling Moses, tell the Jewish people. But something different about the instruction over here is where God says, in the Torah it says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe behar Sinai. And God spoke to Moshe at Mount Sinai, and telling him the laws of Shmitah, of the sabbatical year. So Rashi, the biblical commentator, quotes prior biblical commentators and say, Ma inyan Shmitah etzel har Sinai. What is specifically important about Shmitah, about the sabbatical year mitzvah, commandment, that the Torah has to say that it was given at Mount Sinai? What's special about it? And if you look at the Torah, at the description of the laws of Shmitah, there is something unique about it in the Torah. That most of the mitzvot in the Torah are just mentioned, this is the mitzvah, and go learn the details elsewhere. But the mitzvah of Shmitah, all the details are there. All the details, the ins and outs of what happens to the field and who can take what from where and when, and what happens if not. All the details are right there in the Torah, in the biblical rendition, in the scripture, in this past week's Parsha of Behar. So Rashi says that the reason why Shmitah, the reason why Mount Sinai was quoted at Shmitah, at this mitzvah, is to tell you, to inform us that just as all the details of the mitzvah of Shmitah, of the sabbatical year, were given at Mount Sinai from God to Moses to the Jewish people, so too all the other mitzvot were given with all their details from God to Moses to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. That means all the details, all the generalities, all the specifications, everything was at Mount Sinai. There's nothing new that the rabbis made up, contrary to popular opinion. So that's the lesson that Rashi quotes and that Rashi brings from the Talmud, from the Midrash, that we know that all the details of all the mitzvot were given at Mount Sinai, just like the mitzvah of Shmitah. Now, this quote has become a very common quote in the Jewish tradition, in the scholarly echelons. And when you want to say to somebody, hey, what's the connection between this and that? You say, Ma inyan Shmitah etzel har Sinai. If you want to sound really scholarly, just say that. to your local rabbi, rebbitzin sometime soon, or learned fellow, say, Ma Indian Shmitah Eitzel Har Sinai. What are you talking about? Anyway, so that's that. Now, I'm going to dive in. The Rebbe, as usual, brings a whole new perspective and a depth to this concept of Ma Indian Shmitah Eitzel Har Sinai. And the Rebbe asks, why was it specifically the mitzvah of Shmitah, of the sabbatical year, that was chosen by God to be the landmark mitzvah, the star, the one that will be the teacher for all the rest? Why was the mitzvah of Shmitah? What's special about the mitzvah of Shmitah? And the Rebbe asks, actually, he says there might be 3 reasons why it shouldn't be. And he says, reason number 1 is the law of Shmitah only occurs in Israel. It doesn't happen outside of Israel. So why use that as an example for all the rest of the mitzvot? Number 2, it's only to do with the fields and not anything else, and fields and food. And number 3, when you work the field, you only work the field during the daytime, not at night. So why the Rebbe strengthens the question in a deeper way of Ma Inyan Shmitah Eitzel Har Sinai. Why did God choose the law of the sabbatical year of laying the land fallow as an example for all the other laws? And the Rebbe, of course, brings a new insight to this and says there are 3 characteristics in this law that are unique. Not unique as in not found anywhere else, but they're special and they're found as an example for every other mitzvah. And these are the 3 characteristics. The Rebbe says, number 1, a person goes through times, like a person goes through lots of changes in their lives. The word shana in Hebrew means year, and it also shares similar letters in a root with the word shinui. Shinui means change. The word shana means year because it contains all the changes that can possibly be in one year. All the seasons, the weather changes, and any other changes that one might imagine. So shana, year, change. The Rebbe says that God chose a mitzvah that surrounds a full year, that encompasses a complete year, to tell us that just like the mitzvah of Shmitah, everything was given at Mount Sinai, and it's all important and all the details, and it lasts for a full year. It goes around the circle of the year, the Rebbe said. So too, every other mitzvah is an example for all the other mitzvot that are never changing, and they happen all year round, no matter what the changes are in our lives, in the weather, in our mood, and whatever changes may happen in our lives. We learn from Shmitah that we still can observe and fulfill and connect with the Torah no matter what. So the changes should not make a difference. Just like the Shmitah is all around the year, so too all the other mitzvot apply at all times. Another characteristic of the Shmitah is that what it happens, the mitzvah is to lay the land fallow. What is the land? The land produces food, fruit, vegetables, wheat, wine, grapes, etc. The Rebbe says, just like the Shmitah, when we lay the land fallow and let it rest, we don't just observe it in the necessities that the land provides. And the food necessities, like perhaps bread, is considered the king of all foods. Not to the gluten-free people, but to everyone else. So in the olden days, and in the Talmudic era, they coined lechem, bread, as the king of food, as if this is the one food everyone needs. I think wheat was different in those days. But anyways, it's called the king of bread, lechem. So the Rebbe says that the resting of the land is not just for the bread, it's also for the grapes, it's also for the fruits that are considered luxuries, and people have them for pleasure, not for necessity. Imagine like grapes, you make wine, you don't need wine unless you really need it. But generally people can get by without wine, without fruits or vegetables in a greater extent than they can without the necessities of life in food. So too, says the Rebbe, in our observance of the mitzvos, we shouldn't just observe them in the way that we must. Just do what you need to do. No, take it further and enjoy it. Have pleasure in the mitzvah and make it luxurious. Buy a better pair of tefillin, buy a better mezuzah, get higher quality kosher food, keep Shabbos better, etc., etc. And the third thing, we did time, goes around the year. Second characteristic was the luxury, the pleasure of the mitzvah. And the third characteristic, the Rebbe said, is that it's the earth. The mitzvah of Shmitah deals with the earth, with the ground. The ground seems like a lowly place. It's a mineral. There's a world of minerals. And this, as the Rebbe, a person might think that, to bring God into this world, I need to do something really high. Think about, spiritual things or intellectual, emotional things. The Rebbe says, no, the point of the mitzvah is to bring it right down into this world, into this earth, into the lowest of the low. There you have it, just like Shmitah. To bring godliness into the regular, everyday things that we do. That's one way the Rebbe transformed and brought some new depth to it. Now, forever after, you will know. Ma inyan Shmitah etzel Har Sinai. What does Shmitah have to do with Har Sinai? I know it very differently. God bless you, share it. And join the marathon if you can to support our children with special needs in our local community. If you sign up as a runner or as a biker, it's a win-win-win-win. You get your friends to help you, to help us, help the children with special needs in our family. Go do it.